back to our Indian roots. Now, with this session, let's take India to the world through the lens of sustainability, leveraging Indian traditions for global sustainability. Like Mr. Dasrani mentioned at the outset, we have a brilliant day lined up for you. And raising the bar far, far, far higher at TSS 2021 is our next speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is someone we've been wanting to hear with our bated breath. But before I move forward, please allow me to welcome Mr. Manohar Reddy, President TI Hyderabad, Conference Chair at TSS 2021. Namaskaram, sir, and over to you.
Namaskaram. A warm welcome to all the global delegates. It's my privilege and honor to set the context for the next session that you're all waiting for. This is about leveraging Indian traditions for global sustainability. As we all know, over the centuries, we have followed the traditions that have been regenerative and sustainable, be it eating from the banana leaves or the way we constructed homes, which have actually left very little carbon footprint. What is better than hearing from somebody like Sadhguru ji about how these traditions can help us meet our global sustainable goals? With that, I would actually request to put up the video about Sadhguru ji. Thank you.
In the next half hour, you're going to meet a man who has a devoted following across India and indeed around the world. While yoga and meditation are at the core of his teachings to promote individual growth, the work of the foundation covers conservation, education and health. And you'll find him astonishingly pragmatic on a range of very modern-day problems. Let's meet Sadhguru.
We have the necessary resource, we have the necessary capability, we have the necessary technology to address every human problem on the planet. But the only thing that is missing is consciousness. We started a mass campaign and 6 years I spent planting trees in people's heads. That's the most difficult terrain, believe me. And now in the last 6 years we've been transplanting it, and that's happening much more easily.
Action for Rural Rejuvenation is mainly aimed at rejuvenating the human spirit.
This is an incredible movement that is started in Tamil Nadu. We want to see that this happens to the whole country and revitalizing rural societies.
English and computer skills are very essential to make these children come out of the hopeless economic and social pit they are in. Whatever the nature of your business, ultimately, it is all about human well-being.
Isha Foundation, a non-religious, non-profit public service organisation headquartered in southern India.
We've engineered the outside world in so many ways, but we've done nothing about this one.
If you want to know well-being, in is the only way out.
An incredible rally starting from Kanyakumari, reaching up to the Himalayas with the sole purpose of rejuvenating India's rivers.
We are also launching another campaign called Kaveri Calling. This is 83,000 square kilometers of Kaveri Basin. We want to bring it back, at least 1/3 of it, back into some kind of green cover. We are launching a campaign called Youth and Truth in the month of September. Youth and Truth, unplug with Sadhguru, ask whatever you want.
This precious life, where are you going to invest it? What is it that will be worthwhile today and worthwhile after 50 years? You invest your life into that.
You have to describe yourself in one word.
Would you consider wildlife as 2 words or 1 word?
Thank you and welcome back. I'm happy to introduce Shri Pravesh Sharma ji, who will be the moderator for Sadhguru's session. Shri Pravesh Sharma ji has worked with the Government of India for 34 years before actually he left and started an agri startup. As a MD of small business, agri consortium, he actually was credited with promoting farmers producers organization in the country, which actually created a huge impact. He is also the chair for National Association of Farmers Producers Organizations. Welcome, Shri Pravesh Sharma ji. Thank you. Over to you.
Namaskaram, Sadhguru. And namaskaram,
Namaskaram, Pravesh. Namaskaram to all of you who are there.
Namaskaram. How lovely to see you. And I'm, as usual, blown away by your presence in the Himalayas against this fabulous setting. Of course, I know the Himalayas hold a very special place in your heart. You've been traveling, I think, since your early youth. We've heard you describe your travels on a motorcycle across the Himalayas. But since you're there today, right now, I can't but ask you, what is your first impression after, a long gap that you have visited these mountains?
Namaskaram, Pravesh, and namaskaram to all the others who are at the Thai conference. Namaskaram. Well, it's not that there's been a long gap, it's just from the age of 19, nearly 27 years, except maybe 1 or 2 year gap somewhere. Every year I trekked in Indian part of Himalayas. 16 years ago, once when I came here, many peaks which I've seen in various seasons, any season you come, these peaks were always snow-clad. 16 years ago, I noticed that many of them had become black and bare. Somehow it deeply affected me. I thought this is not something we can fix. So I kind of broke it that year. I did not come, and then I started trekking in Nepal and Tibet and Kailash Parvat and those kind of areas. So last 16 years, every year I've been to Kailash. So I've just been on the other side of Himalayas, I'm saying. So now I'm again back here. Just last month I was in Kailash, and this month I'm here. It's wonderful to be here at Uttarakhand. As I had a conversation with the Chief Minister, and I was telling him, see, if we really, in a focused way, these entrepreneurs who are all here in this organization, Thai, you must also think about this. I know there are various policy issues, but I feel entrepreneurs should come and sit with the political leadership and do this. If we evolve a right kind of policy and right kind of developmental policy towards Uttarakhand, believe me, this has more attractions than anything like the Swiss Alps or whatever. It's way, way bigger and way better. It has everything that you want. Only thing is, our presentation in India has been so bad that we have not presented this very well. There are spiritual elements, there is adventure, there's nature, there is health. There are a variety of tourism can be promoted in this region. I think there is some focus on this right now. I hope it happens that way. But being here is fantastic. I'm in Joshimath after 16 years. You see the mountains behind me. Well, after I'm riding a motorcycle on the Himalayan roads, after I've ridden on the other side in Nepal and Tibet, but this side after 40 or 41 years.
Wow, that's incredible.
I think it was 80 or 81 when I rode last time. But at that time, the motorcycle was weak. It was a 250cc two-stroke engine, a Czech motorcycle of those times. But I was young and strong. Now I am who I am, but the motorcycle is super competent. So it's making up both ways. No problem, nothing has been lost.
Man and machine, both that are working. But, this really tempts me to, seek your response in the last, I think, decade especially, the kind of, shall we say, disturbing events that have happened in this part of the Himalayas, right from, the Kedarnath flood, the, various landslides. We had last year a very serious dam burst, which was under construction. People say that the third, pole, which is what the glacier system of the Himalayas is referred to after the polar ice caps. This is the largest reservoir of fresh water on Earth. The alarming rate at which these glaciers are receding. So all the things that you talk of course, are so desirable, so attractive to enable people to visit and experience nature in all its grandeur and beauty. But is there a clash now that we are heading towards between so-called development and the need to sustain these places?
See, that is why it's very important. See, people always think if tourists come, they will destroy. Why should it be so? Why should it be so that if wherever people go, the places that they enjoy, they must destroy? This we can change. It's very easy to change this if we have a focused process of education and a certain level of… Before people come into these kind of sensitive areas, there is a certain amount of instruction. It can be done, and the current generation is very much open to it. It is just that we have not done enough with the people. This is the issue. We need to understand this. There is I'm sorry, there are army helicopters flying behind me, so… this is the issue. We always think the solution is elsewhere. When we understand all ecological issues, all environmental issues, all the issues literally on the planet, there's only one problem on the planet, that is a human being. Without fixing the human being, without transforming the human being, how will you transform any situation? So one important thing is this, that we have not paid enough attention to the human being. We have not paid enough attention to raise human consciousness in such a way that it is naturally alert and inclusive to all life around us. This is the nature of our culture, that, this whole process of being worshipful towards everything was a natural ecological care, because we are one of the few lands on the planet where we have existed on the same land for thousands of generations. How many years, nobody really knows, but it dates back, even archaeological proof tells us 12,000–15,000 years ago, they were evolved cities and stuff like that. So, when we have survived like this, it's only because we developed a certain reverence to all life around us. We saw that every life has equal… I'm sorry. Say, for example, there are over 100 species of trees which are held in great reverence and as sacred species, over 100 species of trees by different communities. This is a simple way of ensuring those things survive. But in the last 30–40 years, due to population pressures, very short-term, short-sighted policies, these things have been overlooked and things have been done. To give a very heart-rending example, in 1730, the local government at that time, a king of that area, the Vaishnoi community, they revere certain species of trees. So they wanted to come and cut it for some commercial purpose. So 363 of the community, men and women, put their heads on the trees and they were chopped along with the trees. 363 men and women sacrificed their lives to save one tree, one person died. And after that, the king was so deeply disturbed by this that he said, no green tree should be cut in the kingdom. If you cut, it must be a dry tree, you cannot cut a green tree. He passed that kind of a law. So these things have always been there, but these things have been overruled by various policy decisions we have taken. It is very important because without people's emotional involvement in something, you cannot save that aspect of life. Whether it's a tree or a mountain or a river or whatever, it is very important. People must have some sense of emotion and passionate involvement. Only then you can save, because today the all-pervasive human population, it is the way it is growing. They're saying by 2050 we will add another 2 billion people to this existing population. At that population, preserving anything will be a big challenge unless it means a lot to the people. It is very, very important. We have to bring this about. We are in various ways doing this. With Rally for Rivers, we ignited 162 million people to support the movement. Out of that, the policy changed within 3.5 months. The recommended policy for all the 28 states changed because of that. And now the Kaveri calling, we have changed various policies in the state government and also on ground. It is going on as a great movement. So this is only possible if you bring an emotional connect, because ecology is not a science. I'm sorry, don't take this wrong. I'm not saying it is not a science at all. I'm saying it's a part of us. It is not an academic science, rather, let me put it this way. It is not an academic subject. It is a part of our life, because over 90% of our body, in terms of our genetic content, our parental cells that we have, the genetic cells that we have, is only 10%. 90% is microbes. So this is ecology. Like the soil, the living soil, actually the word human comes from the word humus, which means live soil. So without a feeling for the soil, you cannot have human beings growing well. But we always, in this culture, we bow down to the soil. Even now, in southern India at least, before the farmer steps into his land, he will always bow down to the soil. He calls it Taiman. This means mother soil, you know. Well, in some cultures, they call it dirt. That's a different matter. I'm saying, but they have managed to preserve it to some extent because of lack of population pressures, as we have. But because of population pressures, we are forgetting everything. This emotion is needed to ignite, to be ignited in people. Otherwise, you cannot, no government can do anything significant except talking about it and making policies. But on ground, if it has to happen, people have to feel for it. So this has to come, this is deep-rooted in our culture. This has to be brought back in various ways.
Sadhguru, you mentioned population, so I cannot resist asking you this. What you suggest as a person who's completely integrated in his thinking, you do not see artificial barriers between nature and human beings. As you said, we are ourselves a part of ecology. Yet if you are to talk to governments, you are to talk to businesses, enterprises, corporations, for them people are citizens who vote, they are customers who purchase goods and services. So your concern about the ever-expanding uncontrolled population growth perhaps runs into the headwinds of political and maybe even economic force.
Oh, not just headwind, a typhoon. Because everybody sees more people as more customers. Voting customers, buying customers, praying customers, heaven-bound customers, all kinds of customers, okay? So religious people, political people, and unfortunately, parts of business people, all want more people. Well, we need to understand at any time, if any one species outruns other species, we are heading for a global mass dissemination of life itself. Because right now, just to put it very simply, well, in the last 50 years, 66% of animal, fish, bird, amphibious, all this together, 66% of their population has come down. But in the last 50 years, we have doubled our population or more. In the beginning of 20th century, we were only 1.6 billion people. Now we're inching towards 8 billion people. This is just irresponsible reproduction. Or let me put it this way. See, in 1947, an average Indian, his life expectancy was 28 years. That's a disaster. That means both you and me have no right to live right now. But fortunately now, in these 74 years, life expectancy is also reaching around 74, 73, 74, which is a great achievement for any nation, which is a phenomenal achievement. This has happened due to various reasons: vaccinations, prevention of diseases, the growth of medical sciences, and more reach to the medical facility in the country. Various aspects has achieved this. So essentially what this means is, we got to postpone death. Well, I am not propounding any philosophy here. All I am saying is, all of you are business people, you know some mathematics in your head. If we postpone death, we must also postpone birth. It's as simple as that. Otherwise, the numbers will be unmanageable. Well, you may have a lot of market, but this is like, if we go in this way, this is like the Panchatantra story. A man is sitting on the wrong side of the branch and cutting it. When he succeeds, he will fall. So for businesses, for political parties, for religious groups, for all of them, what is their aim? Let them at least declare how much population they want. They want 50 billion people on the planet. Let us at least let them state it, no? How many people can their heavens populate? How many people can you do your manufacturing for? How many people do you want as voters? Please define it. When we are able to say how many tigers should live in this forest, how many lions should live in this grasslands, how many elephants should be in this area of wildlife, when we know all this, how come we don't know how many human beings? Well, we don't want to think like that because we are super emotional about ourselves. But if we go like this, we will pay a price that you cannot imagine. For example, I'm not here to paint a dark picture because I'm essentially very positive about life, and I know as there are problems, there are solutions. But most people have not understood the problems. Let me tell you the problem of what it is. The problem is this: apart from wildlife and other species disappearing, see, when we say species are disappearing, everybody thinks, oh, tiger is under threat, panda is under threat somewhere, polar bear is under threat. Yet, yes, it is true, these are exotic creatures which has taken millions of years for nature to create. We have no business to destroy them, we must protect them. But we must understand the real danger is somewhere else. 80%, 80, I'm making it very clear, 80% of biomass insects have disappeared in the last 30 years. This is death of the planet. This is literally death of the planet. Now, in any agricultural soil for that matter, in a forest, if you go in the Western Ghats, if you go into the forest, if you take a sample of soil, the organic content is over 70%. In agricultural soils, United Nations has said it must be at least 3 to 6% minimum for a soil to be productive. But in 62% of India's soil, we have less than 0.5%. Do you think you will make a nation out of this? We've just forgotten, just before 60s, we had famines, which used to take millions of people every time. There have been great famines which have taken over 3-4 million people, but others have taken hundreds and thousands of people. Every other year, we used to have famines in different regions of the country. With efficient transformation, transportation processes, with this very short-term thing, but it has solved our problems in some way. The green revolution that we started, which has fed our people for these few years, but from just before 1960s, we had famines. Just in this 50 years, we have completely forgotten there is something called a famine. But we must understand, now many scientists are predicting that by 2035 or 2040, India could once again face serious food shortages because we won't be able to grow food in this land. 60% is nearly fallow. So this is mainly because unbridled plowing, unbridled agriculture, without any laws to control it, without any laws to guide it, anybody can do agriculture whichever way he wants. The simple thing is this: what is the solution, people will ask. I'm not just because I'm not going into elaborately into those solutions, because right now we are in the process of unfolding a global scale movement called Conscious Planet, where it's all about soil, because that is the real issue. The entire 87% of the world's life, including you and me, we all survive in the 36 to 39 inches of topsoil. This soil is gone more than 50% in the last 50 to 100 years' time. This industrial level agriculture that we are doing without putting back any organic content. I mean, I don't have to tell you, you are very cognizant with these things, but for everybody else, let me say this simply, put it in a simplistic way. See, if you, out of 1 acre of land, let's say you grow 1 ton of wheat, rice, sugarcane, whatever. If you grow 1 ton of something, what you have removed is 1 ton of topsoil. So right now, United Nations, UNCCD predicts that we have soil. Their calculation says we, in the global scale, we have soil only for another 80 to 100 crops, which is approximately 45 to 50 years. After that, there will be serious food shortages. Either you postpone birth now, or you have your grandchildren dying without food. This is where we are going. But now, the distractions are like this. Somebody says, in my lab, I can make tomato. And everybody is excited, super excited. The media covers it like anything. Social media pops up these things. Is this the way you're going to produce food for the world? You destroy the soil and you're going to produce food in the lab. You think it's really a solution? You think this can happen? But so much distraction like this is happening. For any ecological concern, constant distraction. For example, Delhi air is not good. It is, smoky. This is the only place where you can see the air, that you breathe. So, Delhi air is not clean, is not an environmental or an ecological situation. It is a civic situation, it's a civic problem. In Mumbai streets, plastic covers are floating around. This is not an ecological issue, this is a civic issue. There is no water in Chennai. This is not an ecological issue, this is a civic issue. We are painting all civic issues as ecological and environmental issues because the urban people take charge of everything. All the narrative in the world is controlled by urban people, not only urban people, people who have no other work but being on social media. They are deciding the narrative on the planet. All kinds of people who have no idea of what's happening in the planet are talking about it. Scientists have spoken, but they have no loud voice. And they write in a language that nobody can understand. So I have taken this upon myself as a part of Conscious Planet. The profound scientific data that is there, I am making it into a very simplistic, understandable thing. Making it simplistic, there is a danger. These people will pick up on scientific data and say, oh, this is not what it is, and they'll find some nuance in it. That is not the problem. If you want a solution, larger population should participate, otherwise it will not happen. Why is it ecological issues are not addressed in the world? Is simply this: democracy. When I say democracy, the rule is for 4 years in some countries, 5 years in some countries. Nobody is interested in making an investment beyond 8 to 10 years' time. But ecology means if you invest today, for example, The Mayan cultures got wiped out. Mayan cultures and Mesopotamian cultures got wiped out, mainly because of soil degradation, excessive farming. And in the last 1,000 years, after those cultures went down, for example, in the Mayan region, afforestation has happened, naturally forests have grown, but scientists have studied the soils and said, even today, they have not fully recovered as carbon sinks after 1,000 years. So we must understand this. When we destroy soil, we can't turn it around. Your Delhi air is not good. If all of you walk to your office or cycle to your office for 3 months, it's over. COVID time, it was suddenly clean, all right, when the lockdown happened. So I am saying with the right kind of laws, with the right kind of technology, we can fix it within 2 to 3 years' time. We can make sure Delhi air is good. Now plastic thing are floating. With little bit of education and enforcement, we can fix it. Water is not there in Chennai, you can fix it. But soil is not like that. If you invest today, it will yield results after 20, 25 years. Nobody is interested in this because it is not within the democratic, the terms of rule. So it's very important, at least 60% of the world's population has to stand up and say, this is what we want, because the very body we carry is soil. This is the nature of yoga. The yoga means this, many yogis will eat only those substances which are grown within the radius of the distance you can walk in a day. Suppose you can walk, let's say 20 kilometers a day, 20-kilometer radius, what grows there only he eats, because he clearly experiences that the soil that you walk upon is the body that you carry. If you eat substances coming from that part of the earth, there is a relationship, it's not separate. Most people will not get this point till you bury them in that soil. But when we are alive also, there's an interaction, there is a communication. All the time being separated from nature is making a human being as if he's an alien who's deciding everything from his thought process and his laboratory science. No, if you live on the land, you will know this. So fixing these problems is very much possible with human intelligence, the kind of technologies we have and the ability to communicate to the whole world, it's possible. This is the effort we are making. We have formed a separate group of people away from Isha Foundation as Conscious Planet. And this is unfolding in 2022 in a big way. All of you are tied, must be with us because there are 5.26 billion people who hold franchise in their hand. That means they can elect governments.
These are very evocative words, Sadhguru. And
we want to touch at least 3 to 3.5 billion people, because only when numbers speak, governments will listen. So we will handhold the governments as to what are the simple policies that you can make to see in the next 20, 25 years. In every country, there is a minimum of 3% organic content in the soil. We need to do this. For this, there is a whole lot of enterprise which can participate in this. You can come up with tremendous amount of innovative enterprises as to how you can participate in this process, because this is most fundamental. If you fix the soil, you fix the water. If you fix the soil, you fix the air. I will not go into the science of it, but you can look it up. If you fix the soil, if soil is rich, air will be clean, water will be pure, and it will be abundant.
So these very evocative images, which I, of course, completely resonate with, because my civil service career and also subsequently what I'm engaged in focuses on agriculture and its related outcomes. If I could, mention, while you were speaking, I was remembering my first posting as a civil servant was in a place called Bastar, which is now in Chhattisgarh,
Oh, yes.
very remote tribal area. And when I joined, the first project I was handed over was to go to a place called Abujmar, which is a very remote part of Bastar, and spend a 3-month period working on ending the process of shifting cultivation, the slash and burn agriculture, which people used to practice. And of course, there were no roads, you couldn't even go on a bicycle. So I trekked that area for 3 months. And I came out realizing that a very sophisticated ecological management system existed in those hills, and it was being managed by those communities, which included how to use the resources in a very balanced way. They would cultivate a slope for 2 or 3 years and then let it for the next 50 years. 50 years, they would not go back to that slope. There was a whole social protection system built into it. So it was very sophisticated. But so-called scientists had decreed that this was ecologically very damaging and we should convert those people to paddy farming. Of course, there were no flat plots, but we were supposed to do that. But anyway, I mentioned this because you talked about the centrality of people in any transformation that we are likely to see in our ecology. Ecology is not something that can be, done by some remote, instrumental intervention. But do we also perhaps err in ignoring some of the live examples and a very long history of a balanced ecological approach, especially that our agriculture, our dietary and cultural habits, actually practiced in this country for centuries, and as you say, maybe for thousands of years? Is there a way
I
we
would
can
say
reconnect?
very much, very much. This is why I said, the people who lived on the land for long periods of time, they naturally understood the way of the land. How to, because that is the only wealth they had. If they had to eat, they had to keep the land well. So they had many practices. I mean, in this limited time, because these things need to be explained, otherwise people… Because today agriculture means buy a Monsanto seed and do engineering to it, not inner engineering, genetic engineering to it, and then throw a lot of designer fertilizer and you'll go to the marketplace, because this is not about food, this is about a produce, all right? This is not about food, the food that we consume. Will it bring health? Will it bring well-being? To me and the earth, there is no such concern because you don't have to live on the land. So this has become our idea of agriculture. But people who lived on the land for thousands of years, everywhere in the world, they have evolved different, systems with which they can protect the land. But probably India and Southeast Asia, largely tropical countries, I would say, evolved systems where they knew how to keep the fertility of the land forever, and they understood how every other life has a role to play in everything that we produce. Out of this, it is a very common thing, where when I was a child, I used to always see my great-grandmother, before she eats anything, she will first go and offer food to sparrows, from her, whatever she's going to eat, whatever she thinks she's going to eat, her diet. From that 50% she will give it to sparrows, squirrels, whatever other creatures, ants and everything. So the understanding was, without all of them being well, we cannot be well. This was a very deep-rooted consciousness in the country. For example, about the land, even when I was living on farms, this was a normal thing. Suppose we have, let's say, you have 10 acres of land. 8 acres we will cultivate little aggressively. The 2 acres, we will cultivate something which we intend to take yield. For example, usually in South India, we throw horse gram. And when it's just about seeding, then we plow it back into the land. This would always create, if you put horse gram crop and plow it back, minimum 3 to 4 inches of humus it created in the land. So next year we will do crop there, another 2 acres we will leave it open for horse gram to rotate it like this. So every 4 years, 5 years, this got 2 to 3 inches of humus which maintained the organic content. Of course, there were animals on the farm that also added. But the most important thing, we understood that every bit of it cannot be commercially pushed. See, right now, if you live in a city, if you have a plot which is, let's say, 10,000 square feet of land, now the city laws are clearly telling you can only build 7,000 square feet, 3,000 square feet must be there for yourself and your neighbor and whatever else. Why is this not there in agriculture? Traditionally, we always had it self-imposed. If somebody did not know, in the panchayat, they would tell them. The elders in the village would say, you cannot use the land like this. You have to rest the land. Some parts of the land you have to
rest and rejuvenate. This is a part of our culture. But unfortunately today, if you have 10 acres, every inch you farm and it's full of salts and we are killing the bioactivity. See, most of the bioactivity is within the 9 inches of the topsoil. When you plow it and leave it open, that itself is killing everything. It's very, very important. Large parts of land, at least 30 to 40% of the land, should go under shade. Right now, this is what the tree-based agriculture movement that we are running, agroforestry movement we are running. This will work fantastic for the farmer. His income will rise many-fold over, but the soil gets rejuvenated. The nutrition value in the food goes up significantly, and market prices that you get for it is much higher. All this has been proven. It's not like one-day experiment. Last 22 years, we've been at it. Over 100,000 farmers are right now in the process. Right now, we are trying to inculcate this for 5.2 million farmers across the Kaveri belt. Fortunately, now the central government has made a detailed project report for 13 river basins on the basis of Kaveri calling project. But implementing this will not be possible for the government to do it by itself. It has to be a people's movement. Government can change policies, create opportunities, but still to shift from one way of doing things, especially in rural India, to another way, it takes a whole lot of things. This is where enterprise can come in. There are many ways we can do it. As you know about FPO, you've been, I don't know if I can call you this, but in a way, you're the father of FPO movement in the country. And today, we are operating about 15 to 16 FPOs, and some of them are very successful. Definitely, it's a way forward because the land has been so divided. Any change that has to happen, individual people are incompetent to decide. I'm using the word consciously. They're incapable and incompetent because their land size is so small, they cannot really apply anything unless there is some kind of consolidation, not of land, at least of activity, that farmers act in tandem together to make these changes happen, which is happening wonderfully well, but it's not still large enough for it to really make a difference for India. As I said, 62% of India's land has less than 0.5% organic content. There is a humongous opportunity for entrepreneurs to look for various possibilities, how to address this issue.
Well said, Sadhguru. And yet the reality is that the bulk of investment, the bulk of financial flows globally, as well as within our country, are directed towards what we can call industrial technologies, now increasingly digital technologies, not technologies which impact, let's say, agriculture production systems or food systems in a larger sense. How do we create this consciousness, as you said, beyond the individual consciousness, let's say among the leadership, especially corporate leadership, to recognize that this is essential if we are to have a sustainable future?
People tell me I'm not an expert on these issues, but people tell me 72% of the world's investment is in approximately some 43 or 44 cities in the world. This will lead to, once investment is so skewed, populations will move in a big way. It is expected that by 2030, 1.6 billion people will migrate from different parts of the world to urban centers. In India, it is expected over 220 million people will migrate to the urban centers. You are living in Delhi, you know 220 million people, even if you take 20 million people or 30 million people to Delhi, what will happen to Delhi? What will happen to your infrastructure? What will happen to your life in those cities? Already most Indian cities are slowly becoming unlivable for its noise level, for its pollution level, for its scarcity of water. These things are building up everywhere. So migration should stop means investment must spread. This is very, very important. Investment must spread means there are immense opportunities. If entrepreneurs are willing to sit with me, because I have been in villages, I see so many things that you could do if you have the money and the enterprise to do it. So, will it be profitable? It will be profitable. But if you are thinking of profit only in terms of
You want to launch an app, and in 3 months it is worth $1 billion, and then you are a billionaire flying all over the place. If you're thinking of that kind of investment, no. This kind of investment is going to kill us at some point. All of us are going to suffer for this. But there is a joy of investment, not only in the return of money, there is a joy of investment in terms of the impact that you make. Because in human life, there are only two things. When it comes to our life, profoundness of experience. When it comes to our activity, the impactfulness of what we are doing. These are the only real things in our life. It is only because of the impactfulness you feel the joy, not because of money. Because if, let's say today there are not enough billionaires, so if you get $1 billion, you're very happy. But let's say all 138 crore people in the country are billionaires. We are in a way because we have 1 billion people. So now 1 billion will not make you happy. So I'm saying the joy of life is in impactfulness of activity. When you do something, if you cook some food, you want people to eat it joyfully. If you write a book, you want people to read it with a certain level of involvement and joy. You need to create impact with what you do. So this is something that entrepreneurs must think. Instead of simply thinking on return on investment, you must also consider, I'm not saying return is not important, it's important. Because if there is no profit, how do you sustain any activity? But impactfulness is important. So for this, one thing that needs to happen is the government policies need to accommodate this, the banks need to do this, and the entrepreneurs need to change their mindset that if you invest in areas which are not considered already developed, or let's say impoverished areas, or not so developed areas, remote areas, if you invest, you must get softer investments. Right now, one problem in India and everywhere in the world maybe, is much more in India, is money is very expensive. So when money is expensive, you want to invest in a place where quickly you will get back because you don't want to take the risk of investing somewhere else. So I'm saying, for example, I'm just off the cuff talking numbers. These are numbers, are not true numbers. I'm just saying, if you do business in Mumbai city, let us say interest rate is 12% for you in the bank loan that you take. If you do business in Mysore city, it must be 8%. If you do business in Velachamipalayam in Tamil Nadu, the interest rate must be 3%. You need to do this. Otherwise, nobody will invest in those places. When nobody invests, migration is the only way. All the people are piling up in the city and making a mess out of cities, and these cities are unlivable. Not only this, you're creating a serious ecological concern because people are converting their agricultural land into real estate simply because it's not worth being there anymore, because they're not able to pay attention to it as they should. Making agriculture into a super profitable enterprise is very, very important if you are interested in sustaining. When I say sustaining, the most important thing that needs to be sustained is soil. That is the main thing. I was in UNCCD and they said, Sadhguru, what are the 3 things that you would say that is a real concern, must be attended to immediately? I said the 3 things are soil, soil, and soil. Because this is the main thing. People have not paid attention, governments have not paid attention because it doesn't yield quick results. Everybody wants overnight results. This is a lifelong saga if you want to improve something of the soil.
So this is an interesting perspective that you say that something as basic as soil is perhaps the point of starting. Yet if you look at ongoing so-called climate mitigation summits, global efforts, we've had a global compact on reducing carbon emissions. We are going to have a follow-up event very soon where the leadership of the world will convene to, in a sense, recommit themselves to those goals. I sense a kind of disconnect between the, shall we say, focus on some aspects of ecological and climate impact and what you describe as the need or the urgency. So you, of course, have spoken, as you said, at UNCCD and other many global fora including the World Economic Forum and various UN agencies and scientific platforms. What is your sense that is this a genuine disconnect between the scientific community, activists, and the political world?
See, when it comes to scientific community, different, let's say different disciplines of science focuses on different things. Somebody is talking about the urgency of attending to the oceans. Yes, it's important. But as I said earlier, these are things that can be fixed. See, right now, there is enormous amount of plastic in the oceans. Apart from that, there are other things, but those other things are national policies which we need to work at. But let's say plastic, which is a major thing. See, plastic is one of the best materials we have produced. If you use plastic responsibly, we can use the same material for 1000 years if we want. It's not like other things. We can use the same material, recycle forever, and use almost everything you can make out of it and still use it. But now the problem is of human irresponsibility, how we use the plastic. So it is all in the ocean, and you've seen those poignant pictures of whales coming with plastic in them and all this stuff. Now, how are we trying to address it? An NGO goes out with a few fishing trawlers and brings back 5 tons, 10 tons of plastic, and this is how we are handling it, and we say it's a humongous problem. But I'm saying, if 10 major nations in the world, I know this is not going to happen right now because we are all at confrontation with each other. If 10 nations employ their navy and their navy personnel and their equipment, believe me, in 6 months to 12 months, you can clear up almost all the plastic in the oceans. But you will not do it because you're not serious about the solutions. So you want air to be clear. Well, there are technologies. Already India has set a goal, whatever we are thinking of moving into electric, hydrogen, nuclear, many things which will, air pollution can be largely controlled with this. The fossil fuel thing going up, just crying about it is no use. In policy, if you decide by this year we will reach here, we can do it, we have the technologies to do it, it can be done. So air, water, these things can be handled. Soil is a serious issue, and soil is the basis of our life. The very body we carry is soil. This cannot be addressed overnight. This needs long-term policies. Nobody wants to talk about it because which government wants to invest in something, major investments, which will show results after 20 years, 15 years, 20 years. But I can show them that on ground, I can show you large-scale recovery of soil, not in 15, 20 years. If we do the right thing, in 5 to 7 years, we can show a significant increase. And this can be a massive economic possibility, health possibility, and also for the entrepreneurs, there is enormous possibility because 70% of India's population is in agriculture. You must do business there. Why are you doing business with only 30% of the population? So everybody is trying to increase this 30% into 40, 50%. That means urban centers will become no. Moving into urban centers is not the answer. Urbanizing rural centers is important. The facilities should move there, investment should move there, but you need softer money for this. So when you talk about the disconnect in the global conversation, this is because most of these conversations are determined by activists. Activists are all based in funding. Without the funding, they won't do anything. They need funding. So funding people will decide which way. Who are the funders? You must track that down and see, then you will see who is who, all right? There's a whole lot of thing. I don't want to get into that kind of mess. That is not the point because there's enough trouble on the ground. We don't have to get into human issues of who is doing what. The important thing is that the conversation is this way simply because people's commitment to ecological issues is overnight. They want to go on the street one day shouting slogans and they think it's a solution. After that, it's over. Otherwise, people's thing is they want to post something on the social media and there is over. No, this will not happen that way. If you want to turn back the damage that we have caused as a generation, the last 2 generations of people, the damage that we have caused. We've taken the largest bite out of this planet. If we want to fix this in any reasonable way, this generation needs to show a lifelong commitment. It's a generational work. It is not an overnight thing. It is not one-day campaign. It is not a social media post. It needs work on the ground. So because people are not ready for that, everybody says, hit the oil company. All of us are using it, but we are complaining about it. All of us are using the electricity. Yes, changes must happen. Now there are technologies with which we can change. India has made this solar alliance, which is a fantastic thing for a tropical country. But solar is not a full solution, everybody knows that. Now there is safer, much smaller level of nuclear generators are coming. So with all this, we can solve the air pollution and this carbon thing going up. But apart from the ocean, the greatest carbon sink in the world is soil. An organically rich soil with a lot of vegetation is the greatest organic sink. Why are we not using that? It is the best water soak in the world. Over 800% of all the water that all the rivers on the planet, fresh water that you hold right now that you see in the form of rivers and lakes, soil holds 8 times more, 800% more. So soil is the best dam that you have. You don't have to build dams. If you have organically rich soil, water is always there. So this is what we need to do if we are interested in future generations living their lives reasonably well.
Sadhguru, you've always emphasized the importance of the individual becoming and behaving in a more responsible and conscious manner. And of course, the work of the foundation that you launched has centered around building more conscious human beings. You also spoke of how democracy or even other systems can be a hindrance because of other competing and clashing priorities, let us say. Can you, share with us some of the approaches that you think have worked in transforming people and which perhaps could now be upscaled? Again, I'm perhaps going beyond my brief to suggest that maybe some involvement of institutions in a bigger alliance with foundations like Isha might be required to take these technologies of inner engineering to the wider world.
Say, as a part of this Conscious Planet movement, I will not go into the detail of the movement. Next year, 2022, full year, I am on this. And we are trying to reach 192 countries, top 3 political parties. We are seeing how to influence them to make the number 2 item on their electoral manifestos as ecology. Number 1 is economy, we will leave that. Number 2 item must be ecology. Economy and ecology doesn't go hand in hand. If I've always been talking that we will marry economy and ecology, because the moment you talk ecology, all businesses put up a wall because they think it's against them. Because activists have always made it like this. Ecology means hit the business. No, there is a way to do business where it can be ecologically sustainable. There is enough knowledge and science about it. It is just that the necessary support systems have not been done. Necessary policy adjustments have not been done. For a simple thing, a farmer would not plant a tree in southern India because if you plant a tree and tomorrow after 10 years, if you need it for something, if you cut it, you could be arrested. We changed this policy with Rally for Rivers. Today you can not only cut your tree, you can grow your tree. What you grow, you can use it. If you cannot use it, why would you have it on your property? I'm asking. So you fly from Delhi to Chennai, every 5 minutes you look out of the window, out of your airplane, you will see India looks like a brown desert, except for Western Ghats and a few patches here and there, largely like a brown desert because no farmer wants to have a tree. Now we are bringing back tree-based agriculture, soil is improving, farmer's economy is improving. Above all, he works in half shade at least. People who live in a city may not understand what it means to work in tropical sun for 7-8 hours a day. It's life-taking, it's heartbreaking work. This can change, and we have changed this significantly. The crop yields are better, nourishment is better, economy is better, above all, soil is better. So this can be done. Well, there are examples in India. In the last few years, there are many movements that government itself launched. See, for example, the Swachh Bharat, the people's involvement. And one thing that was really poignant and beautiful is, when the Prime Minister made an appeal, all of you who are well-to-do, if you have extra gas connections, you give it up. Over 1 crore people gave it up. And it was given to other, less privileged people. So this is the kind of movements we need. Where can government launch all the movements, run it? Maybe, maybe not always, because they have various other things to do, and there are political issues all the time. So it's very important, responsible individuals, I would say, businesses should run these movements. It'll be very wonderful if businesses run these movements, because you can run the movement. There is a problem in the country. If you run the movement and also make a business out of it, there are a whole lot of people who will cry because they are against success. Anything that's successful, they don't like it. Oh, he's making money. Only if people make money, country makes money. Only if businesses succeed, nation will succeed. It is not the military might of a nation which makes a nation great. It is not the political rhetoric which makes us a great nation. It is the successful businesses which makes a nation great. So it's extremely important that enterprises must take up movements and businesses attached to it, so that there is profit to it and everybody benefits from it. At the same time, solutions are found.
Sadhguru, as always, it's so illuminating listening to you. I'm afraid we must leave it there now, and I must hand it back to Mr. Reddy. Thank you so much for all your thoughts this morning.
Thank you.
Namaskaram, Sadhguruji, for your wonderful insights about the Indian traditions and how we can leverage it for the global sustainability. I am very sure thousands of delegates who are listening to this session will carry that message forward in this journey. Thank you, Pravesh Sharmaji, for your engaging session with Sadhguru. Thank you very much.
Reddy Garu. Thank you very
Lokanetra ji and Maumita Senji for making this session happen from Sadhguru's office. Thank you all.
Reddy Garu, my best
And
wishes
over to
for
the
all of
next
you
session.
at the Thai Sustainable Summit. I think you're not hearing me, probably.
I'm here. I'm here,
Namaskaram,
Sadhguru.
Reddy Garu. My congratulations and best wishes for all of you at Thai and for the Sustainability Summit that you're doing. It's great that the businesses are beginning to think in this direction. Time for action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sadhguruji, and our privilege and honor. Thank you.
First and foremost, you always have to do your research or do your homework, as we like to say, because it's so important that you understand what is happening locally in your area. Who are the key players? Who are the people that you really need to convince? Who are preventing the change from happening? Spend hours and hours before school and after school doing socializations with the local authorities in the village, with the women in the village, with the students in the village, the teachers in the local schools of the village, and really make sure that everyone from all levels within that village understood why it was so important to say no to plastic bags, and then help them implement businesses that produced alternatives, that had educational workshops. What does a normal childhood look like? You know, maybe back then it was like kicking or playing soccer, beach days only. And sure, like even when I started, I had those things, but I also had collecting signatures. You know, I also had beach cleanups, and then afterwards we'd go for a surf. So it's about like creating these spaces where we're not thinking that young people are only inspiring, but actually encouraging them to follow their ideas and actually turn it into reality. Learning by doing.
So has the current form of capitalism driven an overly aggressive consumerism culture, which has over the past 50 years precipitated the effects of climate change? How might capitalism adapt to be more mindful of the environment and factors like social mobility and income inequality? Well, that is what we're going to explore in our next session, Capitalism in the Age of Sustainability. And joining us as our panel members, we have with us Mr. Vikas Garg, CEO and founder at 8 Billion, Mr. Shailendra Tipparaju, Venture Partner, Dallas Venture Capital, Mr. Prashant Maniar, Managing Partner, Insighto Advisors, and Thai Mumbai Chapter Charter Member. And moderating the session, we have Editor-in-Chief for Entrepreneur Media APAC, Ms. Ritu Maria. May I request the moderator to kindly take things forward.
Thanks, Amina, and a very good morning from India, where I am based, to all the audience who are there with us today. I've been given one of the most interesting subjects to talk about today, which is about capitalism and sustainability. From my lenses, when I talk about it as an editor of Entrepreneur magazine, I feel that, both sort of conflict with each other. We want capitalism because that's what keeps us sustainable. That's what keeps us our paycheck coming every month. And at the same time, sustainability is almost an antithesis to capitalism if we really want this earth to be a better place. Now, how can we sort of bridge the gap? How can we balance it out and ensure that, we have best of both the worlds? This is really what is going to be a very interesting discussion with the stellar panel that I have with us today, which is actually joined us from virtually all parts of the world. So we've got Shailu, who is joined us from Chicago, I believe. And, he's going to tell us more about how he feels or how he thinks about sustainability, particularly from an global lens, and how US has taken lead in terms of sustainability and what they're doing. Vikas is joining us from Singapore today, and he's going to also talk about food sustainability. But what is most interesting is that, probably if somebody has understood sustainability in a small environment is Singapore. And, I would love for Vikas to tell us more about, as a country, how can you be more sustainable even when you're small, and can that small example actually be taken in some form to the rest of the world, and what we can take learnings from there. And then, of course, we have Prashant. Prashant's joining us from India, and he's going to talk about, entrepreneurship, which is absolutely a native of capitalism. How can entrepreneurship be driven in a manner that sustainability can also be driven as a byproduct? So I'm going to start this interesting conversation with here. Now, as I said, capitalism is about growth. So, we cannot have it, and it means to grow and to grow fast. That's what capitalism stands for fundamentally. That's the value system of capitalism. Now, this does not agree so much with sustainability, which wants you to use your products, your resources much more wisely than we would be otherwise doing. So I'm going to touch about at least 4 factors over here when we talk about capitalism and sustainability. One is going to be the human capital and how we can use which is in fact the biggest resource that we have, and how we can use it wisely. How do we make ecological resources? How do we use them wisely with trying to balance both capitalism and sustainability? Manufacturing, because that is of course vital to our consumption. So how can we make manufacturing more sustainable? And at the last, probably financial side of it. And, because finance drives entire capitalism and would also be needed to drive sustainability. So how can we have more financial sustainability in the ecosystem? Now, given these 4 pillars in mind, I'm going to drive this discussion with this stellar panel. So starting with you, Shailu, I know that you're doing some extensive work in the education sector. One, we would of course like for you to elaborate a little more on that. And secondly, I would also want to know that particularly education is the driver of sustainability, perhaps in some ways, because that is where our future generations are going to get ready from. And to get our future generations ready to think sustainable, to drive sustainability, what is it that the education sector can do to drive this sustainability right from in the young minds of our children? And not just in big countries and developed countries like US, but also in underdeveloped countries like Africa, and also in developing countries like India, China, and so on. So I'm going to pass this on to you.
No, thank you very much for kicking off a very relevant topic. And your insights in starting the session are very, very heartwarming to listen, and also would love to participate, because personally, as an educator, I have other roles as an entrepreneur, as an investor, and most important between the three is I'm a family man. And I think we need to apply not a balance between these two, which puts things at the either ends, but as a harmony of, it's a continuum. You mentioned about what is the educator's role, a family person's role in the industry that is fundamentally defined, talked about at length. I think sustainability is, in a direct sense, if you look up Google, it has 1 billion records, which means there's a lot of noise, there's no signal. But very simply put, sustainability in the educator's eyes is responsibility. From the early age in the academics to the early age in enterprise, be it startups to growing companies, we are taught to survive. From survival, go to significance. Between the two, how do we have the harmony of sustainability as a theme? How do we put values before valuations, which is how do we manage that consumption? How do we look at this from a social angle, from an economics angle, from an environmental angle? To your point, Ritu, you had mentioned about the context of each geography has their own way of approaching at this thing, but there are undercurrents and fundamental things that are very similar. When we talk about the social angle, what we are doing in our arena as educators is look at the curriculum that is being given from a K to 12 early stage in the higher ed as they enter into career. And after they entered into career, what are they doing in the enterprise to be socially responsible, economically responsible, environmentally responsible? There is definitely a lot of lip service that is played. There's a lot of greenwashing, if that's a term that's familiar for some folks here. We just have to step back and say, are we taking concrete steps? And these discussions are the beginning of such steps. So let's look at the social for just a minute. We need to apply ethical best practices in, are we establishing the proper governance models, monitoring models, and measurement models to see, have we baselined the definition? Have we baseline progress? Have we baseline measurement across each geographies? There's a fierce competitiveness even across continents. I travel multiple in my teaching responsibilities, and I see that in one sense there's a healthy competition, but on the other end there's also the dominance that is inherent between geographies to say who's the superpower of sustainability, if it's ironic enough. And we just have to say, are we sharing socially? How are we building the society as a community together with sustainability at the heart of it? Fundamentally, business in its base sense, economic growth is relevant and important for us to go as a society to the next step. But if we do not protect tomorrow at the price of our sustenance today, and we forget the lessons of yesterday, that comes at a very heavy price. So growth is required, but I think an organic growth in the relevant sense of education applied on what cost are we paying to grow as an economy? What cost are we paying as far as relationships between each other as nations, between each other as people, between each other as communities? And third, I think environmental awareness comes at many, many dimensions. There is more awareness of people having to recycle. There's more awareness of companies doing green initiatives. And I will definitely hear from my colleagues Prashant and Vikas on innovators, entrepreneurs, investors are now doing impact investing to be very, very particular on, are our investments very, very deliberate in where we are putting our investments? Is net zero just a flashy item on the PowerPoint by the company, or are they doing very, very concrete steps in the net zero? Are they providing measurement metrics to us? So I think to your question on a broad sense, what makes me happy, I will mention that first as an educator, is the awareness has begun. The solutions only come when there's awareness. The solutions take shape when there's education, and the solutions are measurable when there's action. All three of these are happening at a global context. And from my perspective, I'm very actively engaged in delivering this. In fact, part of my company's mission on the Green Zone project that we have begun starts at the academic level, goes to the enterprise level, and is actively engaged in investments. Companies such as Examity on education or Whistle Drive in transportation, we are very consciously asking the CEOs, please provide what have you done as a company to provide a green footprint to protect tomorrow, and how can you continue to deliver that message internally to your organizations, externally to your partners, and participate in conversations like these to share your wealth. With that, I'll pause and see if there's any follow-ups, Ritu. Thank you.
Sure. I love your point about thinking value before valuations, and I think it is so important if we really want to drive sustainability today in the larger context of the economy. But yes, of course, it has to be driven in our young minds for it to really take shape in the years to come. It's not a short haul process for sure, sustainability or driving sustainability. It's going to take a long time for it to happen, and the sooner or the younger we start, the better. So thanks for that, Shailu. Prashant, I'm going to come over to you. Now, capitalism find its a foundation in entrepreneurship. So people are entrepreneurial, and therefore they end up building, million, billion, $1 trillion enterprises. But do you fundamentally feel that current entrepreneurship, which is driving growth to happen at a 10x, 100x, or whatever rate that you can think of today, is counterproductive to sustainability, because we are trying to grow too fast as a world, as a universe. We want to get on Mars when we've not even covered the whole Earth over here. So, and fundamentally what happens is, it is not about what we are finding further, but what we are leaving behind. We have created so many resources and spent millions and billions of dollars doing that, driving entrepreneurship. And capitalism itself is becoming or coming into a very short cycle. The spurts of capitalism, they're becoming short. We see that, we must have spent like $1 trillion in terms of oil drilling. And suddenly when we're now overpricing oil, we are saying that don't use oil or don't use petrol. Go on to electric vehicles. But I'm quite for it. It's a renewable form of energy, and we should be using that. But what about the investments that have already gone into drilling of oil and gas? What about that? I mean, is that sustainable to leave all those or forget about all those investments and start now driving onto another ledger? Is this kind of entrepreneurship, and particularly these short spurts of good capitalism, counterproductive to sustainability, according to you?
Well, Ritu, first of all, thank you to you and Tai for having me on this panel. Really excited to participate with Vikas and Shailu. And the questions you asked, actually, I just counted there about 9 different panel discussions. And, I would love to have you on some of those as well. And, Shailu also brought in the notion of impact investing versus, regular investing. So I think each of them are very, very big topics. Each of them deserve their own conversations. So I'll try at a higher level to address some of these and probably add some more points during the rest of the discussion. Just to start with, you mentioned that capitalism being the driver and sustainability as a byproduct. I think that, where we are pushing for, and a lot of people in this conference are pushing for, is that sustainability is going to be the driver, and capitalism is going to enable that key driving force in making sure that our planet is habitable, healthy for future generations, right? I think that's the central theme. And if I just take a quick step back, right? I mean, capitalism we define as private profit maximization, okay, at a very fundamental level. And if I take profit, and it's what Shailu talked about, value add. That's where profits come. Profits accrue to people who add value. And private, by definition, is entrepreneurship, right? Because every private enterprise begins as an entrepreneurial venture, right? Nobody's born as a large public company. And historically, it is true that capitalism, all the examples you gave about oil and fossil fuels, etc., were utilized to drive growth, right? At the cost of the environment, at the cost of planet, at the cost of sustainability. But, and therefore, it was also hampering long-term sustainability of humankind. But now let's take back to, the notion of entrepreneurship. okay? Entrepreneurship is not about just starting companies. There's a fundamental behind it, which is solving a problem. And today, one of the greatest problems that faces humankind is climate change and sustainability of the planet. Yeah. And actually, I think that that's where entrepreneurship is coming up. That entrepreneurs are recognizing this is a problem. We're no longer in denial, right? I mean, if I look back when Vice President Al Gore came out with he got a Nobel Prize. He came out with the movie and Inconvenient Truth, etc. We were still in denial. We're still talking about what's going to happen 20 years down. But today, that reality is already come. Today we are talking of net zero. But there are actually people saying now, and with credible data, that we are already past a little bit of net zero. We actually have to be net negative. And we can talk a little bit about that as well. But so I think, these solutions are not necessarily going to come out of the blue. It's going to be entrepreneurs driving it. It's going to be corporations taking responsibility. To Vikas's point, it's going to be consumers reducing the usage of things that harm our planet. And it's going to be about, financiers enabling that transition to these types of elements. But to me, again, it goes back to entrepreneurships, right? Entrepreneurs are going to drive this change. And I believe that, I don't believe that entrepreneurship, capitalism, sustainability are in conflict. In fact, given this recognition of the problem, they are actually in concert.
That's great. And I'm gonna come back on detail on this, but whose responsibility is it to drive sustainability? Is it the government's responsibility? Is it entrepreneurs' responsibility? Is it is it a common man's responsibility? Whose responsibility is to drive? And at what level?
Well, let me take a simple example. Whose responsibility is to keep our own home and offices clean? Everybody's, right? So if we say government is going to do it, okay, well, why should they? Well, if we say the business has to do it, well, they want to do profits, right? It's actually human beings. We are at the top of the food chain, right? We are actually, the biggest drivers of this planet. It's everybody's responsibility in their own regard. So, if it's a consumer, we have to reduce our usage. If it's a business, we have to be responsible for that. And, people use what we call EPR, extended producer responsibility, for that. If it's governments, they have to put in the right regulation, the policies to enable businesses, people, consumers, whatever, to be able to participate in that through regulation, through support structures, through subsidies, through enablement across the value chain. And, if it's for the financiers, it's their responsibility to ensure that enough capital is available to make this transition happen.
But do you think going forward, we need to plan this a little ahead? We pretty much know that, we're not left with much petrol or gas reserves for our future generations. And we've understood that now. But don't you think this planning should have been done when we were manufacturing cars left, right, and center? To know that this problem would come. And, so, okay, anyway, let's say that you were right when Al Gore said that this was probably a 30 years forward problem. But is it important to realize this today? Let's think of a simple thing like plastic bags. We know it's bad for the environment. It's bad for our waters. It's bad for, it doesn't decompose. But nevertheless, while everybody's saying use less plastic, why can't we just stop plastic production? That would be an easier answer. So, but it hampers entrepreneurship and capitalism. So nobody's government is stepping forward and doing it.
This is such a interesting emotional, financial, and from this touches on so many aspects, and we have a lot of debates around it. The same issue of fossil fuels versus clean energy is the same issue of plastics versus not using plastics. And while I am fully, our whole business and life is dedicated to sustainability, we can't say we will stop using fossil fuels today. We can't say we are going to stop using plastics because, so for example, renewable energy today accounts for 25.6% of all energy consumption or generation in India, right? It's about 100 to 130 gigawatts, depending on who you ask. Well, if we stop fossil fuel usage, what will happen to industry? We will crash, right? So there is always a particular timeline of adoption. Now, the same thing with plastics, right? I think there's about 150 million tons of plastics in the oceans today. And if we stop using plastics, what are we going to do? Now, I know people are using very innovative techniques of degradable organic matter to replace plastics. But until that comes into play through adoption, through reduction in prices, etc. We can't just stop using plastics. Now, can we reduce using single-use plastics? Absolutely, we should. Actually, we use more recycled plastics, like, garbage bags, right? From recycled plastics are abundantly available. They're actually equal or lower cost than traditional plastics. So yes, I mean, those will happen, but I don't think that you can, it's like a light bulb that you can switch on and off. I think there's a transition to that.
Sure.
And may I button for 1 second? I mean, as an educator, I was mentioning before we began that we are professional listeners, but there is a time when the voice of the teacher has to step up. I think none of these solutions, and Prashant, beautiful way of expressing many dimensions. Ritu had 9 questions, you had 90 dimensions of answers with data. That's very refreshing. None of these answers are binary. I think none of these are use this, don't use this. The entrepreneurs definitely are in the driver's seat. There's a lot of passengers who are consumers, who are waiting for the value to be consumed. Who is the owner of the bus? Who's laying the path for the bus? And who's taking responsibility? Rather than using that word, if you use accountability, then the self-regulation will come in. And it's not, I'm a 1 person in a 7 billion person planet, so maybe I can get away with doing something that's not responsible is okay. But when you apply self-regulation and accountability, it is a bottom-up at a micro level. Since we are now aware, we are taking small micro steps. At a macro level, I think definitely there has to be an initiative from the manufacturers of the bus in the probably sense. Larger bodies have to say, hey guys, these are some guidelines. Let's give you some GPS to get in these directions. These are do not go paths. But you just can't shut down the roads of consumption of a particular product and say, suddenly we're going to get better. It may actually make us not so better, but actually worse, because it directly impacts some industries, but it has a transition phase to it. And I think as you enter into the third panelist who will talk about where are the driver dependent consumers sitting in the seats and what is their consumer habits, entrepreneurs are actually gravitating towards solving problems that consumers consume. How is that dimension? But let's wait for those discussions. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Shailu. And so let me jump over to Vikas. Vikas, thank you for joining us from Singapore. Now, Singapore has probably shown some great resilience when it comes to becoming sustainable. And, they've been able to take far more steps. Of course, the size of the country is also very friendly when it comes to making changes and shifts in the larger scheme of things. But, my question to you is that particularly, and this is an off-take from what I asked Prashant, whose responsibility is to drive sustainability? Is it, so consumers have to do it. And today we are sitting in a consumerism society. It is something we've created ourselves as a world. We wanted to buy more. We encouraged people to buy more. Our entire marketing, advertising industry runs on it. So how can now buying more is not something that is going to go away. So how is it that we going, as Shailu also put it, how do we become more self-regulated? And who's, again, particularly from your point of view, as you've looked at Singapore, whose responsibility has been to drive sustainability in the country and how they've been able to do it so well?
So I don't think any of us are here to save the planet. The planet doesn't need to be saved, right? Like the planet is 4.5 billion years old. And human beings, modern human beings have been on the planet, have been on Earth for 200,000 years. Animals have been on the planet. There's, single cell organisms have been on the planet for 600 million years. So 200,000 years, and capitalism has existed for 400 or 500 years. And, so the Earth is going to be fine. It's whether we are going to have a role in being on the Earth for how much longer is what sustainability is, right? Our human definition of sustainability is how long can we consume, how long can we create the constructs so we can continue to consume without, the Earth fighting back and pushing back. That's really all it is, right? So it's like, it's really just us fighting the natural flow of things, right? And natural response. And that's what we're seeing with climate change, right? We're just seeing that we actually can't fight back. The fires are bigger than ever. You know, the weather patterns are colliding. So you've got hurricanes and you've got, you know, droughts and all of this stuff that are just getting magnified. The seasons are getting magnified. There's things that we just can't control. And, you know, look, Singapore is an amazing place to create a company. But in many ways, we also live in a bubble where we are sheltered from a lot of these realities that the rest of the world is facing in terms of climate refugees, in terms of, you know, insanely adverse weather conditions, if you even call things like forest fire weather, or, you know, or drought, or many of the other things. I mean, Singapore imports 90% of the food that it eats. And I think that the reality is here that nearly everybody, we sit in a part of the world that's very affluent, in air-conditioned buildings, eating arugula from Italy. So, you know, there is a, or, you know, even plant-based burgers that are manufactured in California and then flown over here on an airplane. So I think, you know, I think that there's a reality to sustainability, and there's even with consumers, there's a lot of education. And Shailu touched on education, of course, talked about education. And I think education and food are two basic human rights, right? That we tend to think about. They kind of go hand in hand. I sometimes wonder, can you get an education without food? And I sometimes wonder, like, you know, can you get food without an education, right? It's like they're so important and vital to everybody. So when I think of sustainability and I think of the role of government, and this panel and capitalism at the end of the day is a construct, right? To shift industrialization, manufacturing from the public sector to the private sector. And that's really all it is, right? And so far we have not really seen an alternative that's worked, I think, anywhere in the world in the last 100 years.